We are talking today with Barbara Ehrenreich. She is the author of 13 books, including Nickel and Dimed on Not Getting By in America. She is a contributor to Harper's and The Nation magazine, and she is here to talk about her latest book, Bait and Switch, The Futile Pursuit of the American Dream. Barbara, thank you for spending time with us today.
Glad to be with you.
If you could begin, tell us what is the motivation in writing your book, Bait and Switch?
Well, it grows out of Nickel and Dimed, which is about the working poor, or my attempt to support myself on the wages I could earn doing things like waitressing and basically janitorial work and nursing home work and things like that. As a result of Nickel and Dimed, I've gotten many, many letters from people in difficult situations. People who write that they've just gotten an eviction notice, or people who have just been diagnosed with a serious disease but have no health insurance. And I noticed that a surprising number of these people mentioned that they have college degrees, that they even have master's degrees, that they had at one point had decent paying white-collar jobs and had somehow lost those jobs and never got back on their feet again. So that made me think, well, this is another side of the story of poverty in America. What is happening in the white-collar workforce today? And you don't have to do too much research, conventional sorts of research and reading to find out that there is, even at times of relatively low overall unemployment, tremendous amount of churning in and out of jobs in the white-collar world. People no longer have a trajectory where you think, I'm going to, get a job in my 20s and I'm going to sort of rise in it and, get a comfortable position, retire with a pension. That career trajectory is really over. And not just because pensions are almost non-existent, but because there's so much turmoil in people's lives in this white-collar middle class.
And where did the title Bait and Switch come from?
Well, the truth is authors don't usually make up their own titles, but the meaning of it is that business is our most popular major in American college campuses. Students, I've talked to them. I go to a lot of campuses and met students who say, my real interest is psychology, but, that's impractical. So I'm going into marketing instead. Or I really want to write, but I'm going into PR instead. Because that's the bait, that if you are very, very practical and you sort of shape yourself ideally as you can for the corporate world, that you will have security and even affluence as a result. The switch is it's a new corporate world out there. There has been a seismic shift in the corporate world since, say, the late 80s. That this is the era, the era of downsizing, outsourcing. They have so many euphemisms: downsizing, right-sizing, smart-sizing, reorging. That no, really, unless you're at the very top, maybe not even there, you have no security.
Okay, so how did you go about doing your work on this? Did you have to go deep cover?
Well, I decided to investigate in the same way I had done Nickel and Dime, to actually put myself in the situation of an unemployed white-collar person. Actually, it's sort of hard to tell the difference between a freelance writer and an unemployed person, I have to admit. But to try to enter the corporate world. So I had, I was undercover, different name, and a fake resume, but one that could stand up to some scrutiny because I had people willing to lie for me, and presenting myself as a PR person, because that goes with being a writer, a communications person, call myself. And then I went out to do everything possible to find a white-collar job. I thought I should, perhaps aim too high, I thought I should make about $50,000 a year and have health insurance. Is that aiming too high?
So what did you find? Did you find that going out with the resume that you needed to polish things? I know that you went through a bunch of different phases with like coaches and things like that.
Yeah.
When did you start bringing in the hired guns, so to speak?
Right away, because today there is something that is kind of new. It really began to grow in the mid 1990s, and that is what's called a transition industry. You see, white collar people are not unemployed; they're just in transition. That's the euphemism there. And this industry has grown up of career coaches. There are lots of organizations that you can pay to help you get the right contacts, or then there are ones that don't charge any money where you can go to help, perhaps network and find people who give you hot tips. There are boot camps you can attend where for some intensive period, maybe a day, maybe 2 weeks, you will be groomed and rehearsed until you can present yourself. I also went for a makeover so I could look corporate, so I could turn myself into a corporate-looking person. And so I did, my idea was to do everything that can be done. And not because I thought this was a big test of the economy. I don't think anybody can say that from one person's experience, but I wanted to give myself every possible advantage.
Okay, and did you do all those before you really hit the road with the resume, or was it kind of as you went along?
No. The coaches helped, and I had more than one of them, to perfect the resume to the point where I could put it out on the internet job sites and begin to apply online for all the jobs I could. So there was that. But then that kind of overlapped a little bit into the phase of networking and boot camps and eventually job fairs.
Okay, so what did you find as you went through all this process?
Well, I have to say that this was a little bit like through the looking glass. Right off, things were very strange from that very first career coach who, I don't know, he used Wizard of Oz dolls to illustrate his point. A scarecrow, a lion, and a Tin Man doll. And then there was an Elvis Presley doll thrown in. Don't ask me what he was doing there. Another equally strange thing is these career coaches want to give you a personality test. I don't know why, but corporations all believe in these personality tests today, although they have been discredited. They're useless, entirely useless. But my first personality test, I turned out to be good and loving. Those are kind of judgmental words to come up with in a personality test, but leave that aside. And also envious and melancholy. And for some unknown reason, the bottom line, according to my coach, was that I should avoid occupations that involved a lot of writing. Well, there goes my life, The next career coach had subjected me to the famous Myers-Briggs test, which many people will recognize and have been put through. And there I came out to be the absolutely best possible person. She called me the commandant, take charge, leader, real quick to run things. So I said, well, what does that mean? Can I apply for CEO jobs? And she said, no, silly, but you can put that language into your resume. It's a lot of this is this resume padding and kind of faking. So I wouldn't do that. I thought that was just utterly silly. But there is you're a journalist, I'm a journalist. I inhabit what I like to think as a logical, fact-based kind of world. That's not what I found when I entered this nether end of the corporate world at all. For example, a lot of the coaching and the advice books and the networking leaders are really talking, they're spreading a philosophy which is ultimately very victim-blaming. But it's a philosophy that says you control everything with your attitude. You can control the universe with your attitude. You just beam out the appropriate positive thought forms, and whatever you want will come to you. So if you lost your job, you must have been beaming out negative thoughts. And if you still haven't gotten a job, there's something needs adjustment, and you're not beaming out positive enough stuff.
So it's not so much based on what your skill sets in terms of whatever particular job you're pursuing is. It's also sounds like your attitude, personality is a big factor on where you can
Skills.
land.
Nobody seemed to be interested in skills. At least not as far as I got in any of this. There's all the emphasis is on attitude, personality, and what they like to call likability. Now, again, this is very different from the world of journalism, where it doesn't really matter how curmudgeonly or whatever you're like, you get your work done, right? In the kind of writing that I do anyway, it doesn't matter at all. But here so much seemed to depend on self-presentation, how you dress, how you look, this likability factor, and then, of course, who you know. That's what networking is about, who you know. Well, I just finally realized quite recently is that what you ultimately get with that kind of approach is something like Michael D. Brown running FEMA. A nice-looking fellow, I'm sure, and well-dressed, and all the right connections. But it began to seem to me that this is maybe a culture of incompetence, of people who get into jobs because they are likable and know somebody rather than because they can actually do something.
Yeah, a culture where people reach out to diploma mills to get the qualifications that they need.
Oh, these are usually college graduates. No, we're talking about people who've been to 4-year colleges to get, that's your ticket of entry into most white-collar jobs. But then another factor I think that favors incompetence is the fact that a lot of people I met who are the job seekers talked about either being warned that they had a layoff coming to them, a firing that is, or had been laid off because they were doing particularly well, because they had advanced high enough up the ladder to be making enough money to make them a tempting target for some bean counter to eliminate. Now, is that rational? Again, it suggests to me that we have, at least from my individual outside look at it, a corporate culture that does not value things like skill, experience, and the ability to get the job done as much as other things.
How much of the people that you ran into when you were at the networking sessions, how many of their stories came into your book?
Somewhat from what they would talk. But you see, in these networking sessions, you don't get to tell your story. That was a surprise and a disappointment to me. I thought that there really would be a lot of interaction with other people. But usually when you go to a networking event, the ones I went to anyway, somebody stood at the front of the room and you were lectured or you were preached to for quite a bit of time. And because I say preached to because some events advertised as in a completely secular fashion for job seekers turned out to be hard sell proselytizing for evangelical Christian churches. So you don't get a chance to talk to other people. That meant that at a certain point I just went into normal journalist mode and called people, came out to them with what I was really doing, and interviewed them and got their stories that way.
So as you're going through this process, are you getting any bites for people wanting to bring you in for interviews and jobs?
Rarely. I got one company in Georgia called, and that was amazing that they had called. They had emailed and showed an interest, so I immediately called back, And then whoever I was talking who seemed more like a receptionist kind of person, pulled out my resume and said, oh, well, there's a gap in it. No good. Now, with that mean you cannot have a gap in your resume. You cannot have taken time off to have been raising children or taking care of an elderly family member or traveling around the world or whatever it is you wanted to do. No gaps, no gaps. So just like that, I was brushed off from that one. But no, I didn't get many. Look, when you put your your resume out there on these internet job sites, uh, they're contending with tens of thousands of other resumes. And the companies don't even have human beings who read them. They use computer programs to scan them. So it's a completely impersonal process.
I mean, it sounds like from what you're saying is they're looking for a specific personality. They're not really concerned with skill set. They want somebody that's been working, all the way through their entire adult life. No glitches there. It sounds more like they're looking for robots than people.
Well, you said it. I did. I mean, the emphasis on conformity, I found a little creepy and sort of robot-like. This is why I went over, I had a physical makeover to, become as corporate as possible. And I was amazed at the details. I thought, I can dress reasonably well. I give a lot of lectures on college campuses. I think I look presentable in all of these situations. Nowhere near. I didn't even begin to understand all the things that have to be just right. I don't wear them, but dangling earrings could sink you, just sink you. The wrong lapel pin, could mean you're toast. So it's, what's that about? And the rationale again for that is that by dressing completely perfectly by the corporate standards, you are signaling that you are a, quote, team player, meaning you are signaling that you are willing to conform in whatever other way is demanded of you. Now, again, I'm not a management guru. I can't say what's right for businesses, but it seems to me that that kind of emphasis on conformity is absolutely fatal to creativity. And for a period there, when the dot-com boom was on, there was a loosening up. Certainly the dot-com businesses, people could dress more casually and so on. But that period of loosening up is over, at least in the non-dot-com part of the world. In fact, many companies have abandoned Casual Friday, their one big concession to a more individualistic approach.
So do you feel if you had pursued this book, let's say 15, 20 years back, that you would have come up with completely different results?
Oh, yes. No, there's no question but this world has changed dramatically. That the relationship to first in the 80s, it was the blue collar people who were just tossed as companies as we deindustrialized as a nation, and manufacturing went overseas. So, all right, no loyalty to the blue collar workers, but you still thought somehow that the core of a corporation, the thing that makes it corporate in the original sense of the word, is the white collar people. But then in the 90s, you get Al Chainsaw Dunlop. At Sunbeam, you have Carl Icahn, you have a whole bunch of CEOs who pleased their shareholders enormously by eliminating people, eliminating jobs. And they were the CEOs who got paid the most, the ones who did the most downsizing. Now, in the latest survey from 2004, it's the CEOs who outsource the most who get the best pay. So there's no loyalty there anymore. There's no connection that lasts.
And one can even see that on the nightly news when they announce, they do the stock market update and they announce layoffs at company X, and they happen to note on the stock price went up today.
Oh yeah, the stock price goes up when they lay people off. It's you have to wonder ultimately who's going to buy the products. I know right now the unemployment figures are fairly low. Before Katrina, the unemployment rate had fallen by 0.1 of a percentage point. But at the same time, the poverty rate had risen. So these things, something is going on. It's not only that a lot of people are stuck probably permanently in the low-paid, nickel-and-dimed kind of jobs I had done before, but that a lot of people are now falling out of what had once been the more privileged jobs, the white-collar jobs. And it doesn't always show up in the unemployment figures because sooner or later, these laid-off white-collar people end up going down to Walmart or going to some other, a big box store and taking an $8 an hour job, or what are some of the other things I heard about people doing? Well, driving a limo, driving like an airport limo, or, just whatever blue-collar thing you can find to do, and that may very well be where they stay then.
So did you have many conversations with people who were in the similar situation as yourself and not finding jobs and talking about what the heck are they going to do? Eating up their 401ks if they still had them, things like that.
Well, the first things that people do are, cut expenses. And a lot of local newspapers all the time will have advice, for what to do, how to prepare yourself, what you have to do. All right, you cut out the movies, you cut out the eating out, cut the kids' allowances, and the next phase is selling the house. For single people often end up living with their parents, even in middle age, going back with parents. I talk to people in that situation. So you cut expenses as much as possible. You put as much energy and time into the job search, even though things like internet job searching is probably going to be a waste of your time. But what can sink you even further is there are two big catch-22s here. One is a lot of companies now don't want to hire you if you have an imperfect credit rating. Now, you're going to lose your health insurance when you lose your job, because we have an insane system in this country where health insurance is tied to your job. So you lose your health insurance, you're going to get some dents in your credit rating, because you're going to have some it's very unlikely that you're going to go 6 months without some problem in paying a medical bill, especially if you have a family. But that's going to make you less employable. And the second catch-22 is that the longer you are unemployed, the less likely you are to find a job, because you've got a gap now, a growing gap in your resume. So that's why this is really another story about poverty in bait and switch, is about another way people entering into it, people who supposedly had done everything right to be secure.
Did you have any inkling that you were going to run into a situation like this when you first started pursuing this book?
Well, I was not going to pursue the project into the level of blue-collar jobs again, that I had done for nickel and dimed. Been there, done that. I hope I never have to do it in real life out of real need. But I imagined it would be easier for me to get a job. Maybe this is vanity. Maybe I was flattering myself, but I thought, I am the writer of whatever it is, 12 books. I've published thousands of articles in magazines and newspapers. I can write a very good cover letter. I'm a public speaker. I've got all the communications fronts covered here for a communications job. And I didn't so much feel rejected, because I seldom even got in the position to be rejected. I felt completely ignored. No response, nothing. And not to those resumes, and I would diligently follow up any kind of contact.
All right, so what have you learned from all this? What gems can you pass on to those that haven't read the book yet?
Well, I don't give advice in the book to how to find a job, but I do think that people who are out of work should not sink all their time into these job searching methods that are often futile. They should be very careful how they spend their money, because there's a lot of people out there willing to prey on out-of-work white-collar folks. And I do think one way to use some of that time is by organizing, lobbying, advocating for some things we need that would make life a little easier for people in that situation, such as universal health insurance. It is ridiculous to have it tied to, and health insurance tied to a job. Secondly, we need more generous and lengthier kinds of unemployment compensation, as they have in European countries. It runs out now in 6 months. That is about the average time it takes to find a job today, and that means an awful lot of people are way beyond the average. And I also think we should be pressuring our politicians to stop coddling corporations in the name of job creation. So many tax breaks and subsidies are given to corporations and are justified by saying, well, they'll generate jobs. That's why we'll give them this. For example, there was the American Jobs Creation Act of 2005, which allows companies to repatriate funds they've invested other places in the world at very low, like 5% rate of taxation. So Hewlett-Packard is one of those companies. It's getting, I think, $8 billion in a tax break from it at the time that it announces that it's laying off 14,500 people. That's not job creation. That's job destruction. Do we have any elected officials with a spine to stand up to corporations and say, no, you've got to be accountable about how you treat people, or you're not getting these tax breaks and these subsidies from us anymore?
Do you foresee other avenues that people could take to pressure the corporations to be more responsive to our needs?
Needs of employees or consumers?
And employees, consumers, citizens, all the above.
Well, I think that is a much bigger question than I go into in bait and switch. But there are certainly people who advocate, and a rebalance of power. That corporations should not have the power that they have over our economy because we don't have any democratic access to them. Their boards of directors are drawn from a kind of a, inner clique of corporate and very wealthy people. They're occasional celebrities. They're completely undemocratic institutions, but they have all this power over us both as consumers and as employees.
So where do you go from here? Is the next target becoming a CEO of corporations?
Now, if I could, I would love to do that one, but I somehow don't think I'm going to get the job. No, the other kind of book I like to write is history, and I'm back to history.
All right. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank you for spending time with us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
We have just been speaking with Barbara Ehrenreich. She is author of the new book, Bait and Switch, The Futile Pursuit of the American Dream.